Hey there, what's up, everybody? It's time to talk about another controversial subject, and this time we're going to talk about pitching and pitch counts and all of that stuff. And I know what you're all thinking. You're thinking the same thing that everybody our day thinks, which is that pitchers only have so many pitches in them and that there's no possible way that you can go further than that. And if you leave pitchers out there for too long, their arm's going to fall off. Let's talk about one example of where that was not exactly the case. So we're going to go take a look. I'm going to put everything here out of the way. We're going to go take a look here into 1909. You might already know which game I'm going to talk about. It's this one, the 1909, May 10th, 1909 game between Lexington and Winchester at Winchester, in which the Winchester pitcher, Fred Toney, threw a no-hitter through 17 innings. Now, the thing that's really interesting about this game when you read about it, some people know about it, right? Not too many. There are about 300 people who were there in attendance. One of the papers I looked at claimed that there were fans who showed up at the ballpark afterwards when they found out what was going on. Another paper said that there were people who were congregated outside of newspaper bureaus to watch the scores as they went up because of exactly what was happening. In fact, that kind of, I think that's what it says over here. Yeah. After the news reached the city that the teams were tied up in the ninth inning, business was suspended, and all the proprietors and clerks crowded around scoreboards on the street and eagerly watched as in each inning the figures were put up, and citizens trembled for fear the game would go to the visitors. As soon as the result was announced in the city that Winchester had won, factory whistles and horns and automobiles up and down Main Street were blown. Yeah, that doesn't quite happen today. Now, that might be a little bit exaggerated, but not too much. This is a fascinating game because Toney not only did not give up a hit for the whole game, but when you look into this, he hit one man with a pitch, and he gave up one walk. And then there were behind him, unfortunately for him, 1, 2, 3, 4 errors, including an error that he made himself. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 men on base is all that he allowed through 17 innings, right? Would have been amazing if it were a perfect game for 17 innings. Not quite that much luck. But this goes to show you that this sort of thing can happen. One of the things that you'll be interested to note is that the time of the game was 2 hours, 45 minutes. The other thing you want to note is that Baker, the pitcher for Lexington, also threw a 17-inning complete game. We don't know who Baker is, by the way. We're going to get into that here in a second. One more thing to note is the way that the winning run was scored. So if you're sabermetrician, you need to be very, very careful because of what I'm going to say is probably going to shock you. So the 17th inning, when the only run was made, Ellis was the first man up, made a clean single to left. Center Schmidt, so center fielder Schmidt, who was the second man up, sacrificed. There was a bunt. And then Baker, the pitcher, made a wild throw to first, which allowed Ellis to advance to third and Schmidt to second. So it must have been one heck of a wild throw. Goosetree then fouled out, so there was one out. The next man up was Ingalls, who played a squeeze play. He bunted again, which scored Ellis. So there were two bunts there in that 17th inning, and the final one won the game. I thought we weren't supposed to bunt. I thought it was an offensive play of absolutely no value, right? Well, apparently that wasn't always the case in baseball history, and if they didn't do that, this game would probably still be going into today. The amazing thing about this, as I said, is that both pitchers pitched complete games for 17 innings. Now, when we go over to Baseball Reference, it took me a while to find this page because things are not organized well. The 1909 Lexington Colts do have a pitcher named Baker. Nobody knows his first name. There were a couple of pitchers in later years in the majors named Baker, but I'm not sure who they are, if he could be one of them or not. What I want to do eventually when I have the time is to go back through these old Lexington papers. We have, I think, 3 from this city from this year, and just go take a look and see if we can't figure out who Baker is on the baseball team. Chances are that he's mentioned because, the Blue Bonnet League, though we would think that the Bluegrass League, though we would think that, there wouldn't be that many people paying attention to it, actually did have quite a few people paying attention to it in the days of the old independent minor leagues. The other thing I want to say is, whatever happened to this pitcher, Toney, he's Fred Toney. Fred Toney just so happened to have a rather long major league career. Looking at his minor league stats, when we look at his major league stats, he pitched 1911, 12, and 13 for the Chicago Cubs. And, sort of had cup of coffee type appearances. Again, if we go back to show the minors, if this lets me show it or not, we'll find out. Maybe it won't. Might be upset with me now. But if we showed the minors, he was in and out of the minors those seasons. Started off, though, with this great 137 ERA plus. Went out, I don't know if it was to war to the minors or whatever, but he came back in 1915 for the Reds, was a great pitcher for them, was traded in 1918, so he just missed those 1919 Reds, went to New York, where he also pitched well, Every single one of these statistics looks pretty good to me, and wound up eventually pitching for the Giants in the World Series in 1922 and then ended his career at age 34 with the Cardinals, right? So what you're telling me is that this guy who pitched 17 innings and pitched no-hit ball didn't have his arm fall off. In fact, he was able to keep pitching this season and eventually was able to have a full major league career of 12 years afterwards. Not only a full major league career, but have a 1.13 ERA plus, an FIP of 3.14, right? Well, let's see what his WAR was. Oh, look at this. It's 25.8, right? So, I mean, this was actually a pretty good player. This was a guy who was a major league quality pitcher and who definitely pitched well, right? He did all of that despite throwing 17 innings of no-hit ball when he was in the minors. So, there are a lot of different things we can learn about this, including how interesting the game was in 1909. One of the big ones, though, is that there might be some cause for concern as to how pitchers are managed today because they can't do that anymore. Maybe there is some truth in this theory that I see that, oh, well, hitters hit the long ball harder and more often, so we have to throw fastballs that are 102 miles an hour every pitch. Yeah, maybe, or maybe there was something about the pitcher's motion back then that was different. Maybe when you had pitchers who would throw a full windup using their full body, they were able to get a little bit more zip on the ball. Maybe there's something to be said for different types of trick pitches that we talked about, spitballs and emery balls, shine balls the other day. Maybe some of that was helped out a little bit. Whatever it was, the mechanics of pitching did not cause pitchers' arms to fall off back in 1909, but have done so in Major League Baseball since about the early 1960s. Now, I don't mean to be too controversial, but there was a pitcher named Mike Marshall who was pretty good at pitching every single day almost as a relief pitcher in the mid-70s. Mike Marshall had different ideas about pitching before he died, even started his own pitching school that was roundly decried as heretical by all of the pitching geniuses and sports scientists that are out there giving pitchers Tommy John surgery these days. Maybe there was something to what Mike Marshall said. Maybe there'd be something to look back at what old pitching mechanics look like. The modern pitching mechanics are mostly copycats of Tom Seaver and his style. And that's been actually pretty well known among the insiders in baseball for a couple decades now. There might be something to be said for going back to older mechanics that might be a little bit easier on the pitching arm. I'm just saying, all I can do is bring up a couple points and wait for you guys to blow me apart in the comment section. Hope you have a good day. Talk to you later. Bye.